The land was to consist of alternate mile-square sections of land for 5 miles on each side of the route of the proposed waterway. This land was to be sold to finance the canal construction, while the remaining section stayed under federal control. The bill also stipulated that construction must begin within 5 years. On January 9, 1832, a board of fund commissioners was established. This board was given the power to borrow $200,000 for building a canal. The board selected Washington's birthday as the date of groundbreaking, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on February 22nd, with only 9 days to spare on the 5-year deadline set in 1827, a small procession set out from John's Hotel in Fort Wayne. Headed by Jordan Vegas, the only canal commissioner present, they proceeded across the St. Mary's River to a spot on the feeder line where the ceremony was to take place. After a speech by Charles Ewing, a prominent local citizen, Jordan Vegas addressed the small crowd present. He concluded with the words, "I am now about to commence the Wabash and Erie Canal in the name and by the authority of the state of Indiana." He then dug a spadeful of earth, while the crowd gave 3 cheers. After some delay, work began in the Fort Wayne area in 1832. Soon, more than 1,000 laborers were moving dirt with pick and shovel, while more skilled artisans built locks, culverts, and aqueducts under the guidance of the hard-working chief engineer, Jesse L. Williams. At the close of 1832, 19 miles of the Wabash and Erie Canal were under construction. By 1834, crews were working on the Wabash and Erie Canal west of Fort Wayne. Captain Campbell of Park County later described how the dirt was moved in carts and wheelbarrows.
Each teamster led 2 horses, one at a time, from the shovel pit to the dump or towpath, where a dump boss directed to haw, tee, and back. That was the command whether the turn to be made was haw or gee. The boss would throw his weight on the back end of the cart bed, when it would tip down and shoot the dirt out backward and down the embankment. The driver, or leader more properly, would lead the horse and cart back to the shovel pit and turn and back the cart to the pit and lead the other horse and cart to the bank. While one horse was being led to the bank or towpath, 6 to 8 shovelers would be filling the other cart. I led 2 horses for Tom Burns, an Irishman and son-in-law of one McHenry, who had a mile of the work called a section.
In 1835, boats were running to Huntington, and the proposed canal had been extended to Lafayette. Indiana, in the mid-1830s, with most of its population clustered along the Ohio River, with the little mud street village of Indianapolis nearly isolated in an almost roadless interior, and with the northern half of the state almost uninhabited, watched longingly the projects of its neighbors to the east. There was some debate as to whether it would be better to build canals, which had been so successful in New York and other states, or to build railroads, which some people thought were superior. Railroad supporters, among them Governor James B. Ray, said that railroads would run faster and could run all year round, as well as being cheaper to build. Canal men argued that canals could be built with local materials such as earth, timber, and stone, while railroads were built with iron rails, which were expensive and had to be imported from England. In 1827, a committee of the Indiana Senate reported that
every consideration of usefulness, practicability, durability, and economy point to canals and render it obviously inexpedient to waste time upon the subject of railways.
When Governor Noah Noble addressed the Indiana legislature in December of 1834, he stated that No good reason can be assigned why we should longer hesitate to follow the successful examples of other states, to borrow money at a fair rate of interest, and expend it upon some well-selected objects of paramount public utility will not embarrass the government or impoverish the people, but on the contrary will enrich both. In the following legislative session, in January of 1836, Representative Robert Evans introduced an internal improvements bill that was to create a unified system of transportation routes covering the whole state. This mammoth bill, as it was called, created a 6-member board of internal improvements, which was to survey, superintend, and complete 8 projects for which money was to be borrowed by the state. Politically speaking, the Whitewater Valley was the most powerful region of the state, and, heading the list, was an appropriation of $1,400,000 for the construction of the Whitewater Canal, running from Lawrenceburg on the Ohio and up the West Fork of the Whitewater River to the crossing of the National Road at Cambridge City. Provisions were also made for a canal or railroad north from Cambridge City to connect with the Central Canal in Delaware or Madison County. Also included in the bill was the Central Canal, connecting with the Wabash and Erie near Peru and running through Anderson, Indianapolis, Martinsville, and on to Evansville on the Ohio River. An extension of the Wabash and Erie Canal from the mouth of the Tippecanoe River to Terre Haute, including the Crosscut Canal from Terre Haute to Point Commerce, where it would connect with the Central Canal. The Madison and Lafayette Railroad, which was to connect Madison, Columbus, Indianapolis, Crawfordsville, and Lafayette. The New Albany and Vincennes Turnpike, a road or railroad from Jeffersonville to Crawfordsville. Improvements to the Wabash River between the Ohio River and Vincennes, in cooperation with the state of Illinois. And finally, a survey was to be made for a canal or railroad between the Wabash and Erie Canal near Fort Wayne to Goshen, South Bend, LaPorte, and Michigan City. Construction was to begin within 10 years. The routes were laid out through the maximum number of counties and communities, so that everybody, or nearly everybody, got something. In order to finance this huge undertaking, the commissioners were empowered to borrow $10 million at 5% for 25 years, and to pledge as security all canal, railroad, and turnpike property, rents, tolls, and profits. Newspapers talked about
the dawning of a new era in our legislation, highly creditable to the character of Indiana. These days must be portentous of great results, which ere long will place Indiana among the brightest stars in the firmament of our widely extended and happy republic.
It was fervently believed by the legislators as well as their constituents that the internal improvement system would not cost the public 1 cent, while the tolls and other revenues would pay for the system itself in a few years, and would also pay for the expenses of the state government, making taxes unnecessary. It was hard to be against such a wonderful plan. While celebrations went on in Indiana, 3 fund commissioners were in New York to borrow the $10 million. After 2 months of frustration, 2 of the commissioners, Samuel Hanna and Jeremiah Sullivan, left New York empty-handed and turned over the power to contract loans to Dr. Isaac Coe. Dr. Coe negotiated a loan of $1,029,000 with Thomas Biddle and Company of Philadelphia and the Morris Canal and Banking Company of New Jersey, and one of $500,000 with the firm of J.J. Cohens and Brothers. Unfortunately, the Morris Canal Company was in bad shape financially, and the J.J. Cohens firm would collapse within the year. Coe started selling the bonds on credit, which was a risky business and illegal as well. He also became a stockholder in the Morris Canal Company and worked out a deal in which the Morris Company bought bonds from him at 88 and would sell them at 96, splitting the profits with Dr. Coe. It was a time when banking laws were much less strict than they are today, and there was a devil-may-care attitude associated with high finance in general. Our current ideas about business ethics had not yet been formed, and Dr. Coe's business methods were far from unique. It would be several years, however, before Coe's wheeling and dealing was found out, and back in Indiana he was hailed as an honest and conscientious public servant. Padding of contracts and many other irregular practices were to plague the management of the whole internal improvements project throughout its life. Pressure from the Whitewater Valley farmers and businessmen was sufficient to have work on its canal commenced in 1837. By June 1839, boats were running from Lawrenceburg to Brookville. In this same year, the state of Indiana faced bankruptcy as a result of the economic conditions of the country and, to an even greater extent, as a result of mismanaged efforts to carry out the Internal Improvements Act. With only small portions of the work done, building on all of the state projects was totally suspended. The 30-mile stretch of the Whitewater Canal between Brookville and Lawrenceburg was completed and was operated by the state between 1839 and 1841. The legislature of 1841-42 was persuaded to grant a charter to the Whitewater Canal Company to complete the canal from Brookville to the National Road at Cambridge City. The state transferred its interests in the canal to the newly chartered company on condition that it would be completed in 5 years. When the necessary funds were available, the directors met at Connorsville July 25, 1842, and broke ground for the canal 3 days later. The year of 1843 was occupied in constructing the company's lavish and beautiful headquarters building in Connorsville. Actual work on the canal got going in 1844, and the ditch moved north at a fairly rapid pace. The Native was the first boat to reach Connorsville, June 1845. By October of that year, the Belle of Indiana reached Cambridge City. When the Hagerstown Canal Company, financed by local credit and aided by volunteer labor, extended the channel to Hagerstown, 8 miles north of the National Road, a through line of 36 miles ran to Lawrenceburg. A 25-mile canal from Cincinnati connected with the Whitewater Canal at Harrison, making Cincinnati a choice terminus for shippers along the canal route. From Huntington, the Wabash and Erie had crept to beyond Logansport, but Ohio had not yet built the eastern section, and without eastern terminals, the canal could not pay revenue. The Tippecanoe River was reached in 1841. In 1842, the Ohio portion of the canal was finished. Navigation was open to the lake, and the legislature authorized its extension to Terre Haute. Two problems were inseparably connected for the state of Indiana in 1845. One was to complete the Wabash and Erie Canal to a point where it would become profitable. The other was to provide a way to manage the state debt.